There are legends that were never meant to protect. They were created to warn. Stories that don't speak of guardians of the forest, but of something that hides within it, waiting for the right night to act. In the heart of the Guarani forests, there is a name that is never spoken out loud after sunset. Unlike folkloric figures that defend nature, Kurupi represents the most instinctive, grotesque, and disturbing side of the forest. A small being, almost misshapen, described with animal-like features and one detail that can never be ignored. His body carries a symbol of power, domination, and perversion. An exaggerated, unnatural organ that he does not hide, because it is exactly what defines him. According to the stories, Kurupi doesn't chase his victims. He watches from a distance, choosing carefully. Women walking alone, young girls who wander away from the village, the curious, drawn in by the full moon and the deceptive silence of the forest. When the night grows thicker and the jungle seems to hold its breath, they say he appears between the trees, laughing softly, confident, knowing he doesn't need brute force. Fear and desire are part of the trap. Some stories claim he uses his own body as a hunting tool, that he anchors himself to trees to spy without being seen, that he moves fast and silent, wrapping around his victims before they can scream. What happens next depends on who tells the story. Some women vanish, others return in shock, unable to explain what they experienced, and some are never seen again. In many communities, Kurupi is not just a legend. He is an explanation for disappearances, for violence. Tell the fear that stalks the forest on certain nights, a cruel warning passed down through generations. When the moon is full and the path feels too safe, that may be exactly when he is closest. And what if this story isn't about an imaginary monster, but about something that was always there, using myth as a disguise to justify very real horrors? Among the many beings of Brazilian folklore, few cause as much discomfort as Kurupi. Maybe because he doesn't represent just a supernatural creature, but something far harder to face. A raw reflection of fears, taboos, and violence that have always existed in the shadows of human societies. The legend of Kurupi comes from Guarani folklore, spread across southern Brazil, Paraguay, and parts of Argentina. According to tradition, Kurupi is the son of Tau, the spirit of evil, and Kerana, a woman cursed to give birth to monstrous beings. From the moment of his birth, he carries the mark of imbalance and corruption described as small, grotesque, animal-like, and defined entirely by a disturbing physical trait. Unlike Kurupi, with whom he is often confused by those unfamiliar with indigenous folklore, Kurupi does not protect the forest. He uses it. The jungle is his hiding place, his stage, and his trap. The exaggerated sexuality attributed to him is not random. In Guarani tradition, Kurupi serves as a symbolic explanation for abuse, kidnappings, and disappearances, especially of young women who wandered alone or moved through isolated areas. In indigenous societies, the myth functioned as a warning and a form of social control, a lesson passed down to protect, to set boundaries, and to explain what could not be confronted directly. By turning the aggressor into a supernatural entity, Fear was given shape, a name, and rules. Do not walk alone at night. Do not trust the silence of the forest. Do not ignore the warnings of the elders. Over time, the figure of Kurupi became embedded in popular imagination, blending belief, superstition, and reality. And even today, in the 21st century, his name still carries an uncomfortable weight, because, deep down, this legend isn't just about a mythical being. It's about the darkest side of human nature. Stories about Kurupi almost always start the same way. A familiar path, a trail used every day. A woman who steps away for just a few minutes, believing nothing could happen in a place so well known. But the forest changes when he is near. They say Kurupi appears mostly at night, when the full moon lights up the treetops and casts twisted shadows on the ground. His body is small, but his presence seems to fill everything around him. He moves easily between the trunks, using his own anatomy to cling to trees, watching without being seen. There is no rush. Kurupi chooses. The first sign is rarely visual. Many stories speak of a low, muffled laugh, almost childlike. Others describe a sudden, absolute silence, as if insects and animals know something is about to go wrong. By the time the victim realizes she is not alone, it is already too late to run. Kurupi does not act like a common predator. He approaches calmly, confident, fully aware of the fear he causes. His grotesque appearance paralyzes. His body carries a symbol of domination and violence, used both as a weapon and a tool of capture. In some accounts, he wraps around the victim quickly, leaving no chance to react. In others, he appears suddenly, blocking the way back. There are stories of women dragged deep into the forest, disappearing without a trace. Entire villages would wake up the next morning with the same whisper passing between tense looks. Kurupi has hunted again. In some versions of the legend, a few women return days later, in shock, unable to explain what happened, only repeating that something was watching them the whole time. As the years passed, the stories multiplied. Details changed, locations changed, but the pattern remained. Always at night, always in the forest, always someone who believed they were safe. Kurupi became more than a mythological figure. He turned into a constant presence in warning stories, a name used to explain the unexplainable and to give shape to a fear no one wanted to name directly. And the more these stories were told, the harder it became to separate legend from something that might be real. Because in many regions, the disappearances were real, and so was the fear. Over time, the stories about Kurupi stopped being just tales told around the fire. In some communities, they began to blend with accounts that felt far too real to ignore. Women who vanished without a trace, trails where personal belongings were found torn apart, scattered among the trees, and always the same explanation, whispered more out of fear than belief. It was Kurupi. There are Old Testimonies recorded by folklore researchers that speak of direct encounters. People who swore they had seen a small, misshapen creature watching from a distance, completely still, clinging to a tree trunk as if it were part of the forest itself. The moment they realized they were being watched, Their bodies froze, seized by an irrational panic like something ancient had awakened inside them. Some women claim they managed to escape. They describe a constant feeling of being chased, even without hearing footsteps. Others say that after the encounter, they couldn't sleep for days, waking up with the sensation that something was watching them from outside. There are those who believe Kurupi doesn't need to touch you to leave a mark. The trauma alone is enough, and this is where the doubt begins. Is Kurupi a supernatural entity still roaming the forests, repeating his cycle of hunting? Or was the legend created to explain crimes, abuse, and disappearances in places where there was no justice and no answers? For many, the myth became the only way to make sense of the horror. What's most disturbing is that, no matter the answer, the fear stays the same. Because, whether as a mythical creature or a symbol of something far more human, Kurupi remains alive in the collective imagination. And maybe that's because some stories survive precisely because they are never fully disproven. When the forest falls silent under a full moon, the question still echoes. Is Kurupi still out there, or has he always been? The legend of Kurupi is unsettling because it offers no comfort. There is no simple lesson, no peaceful ending. Unlike other figures in folklore, he doesn't punish those who harm nature or protect the innocent. Kurupi exists to remind us that some dangers come without clear warnings. They don't always wear monstrous faces. Maybe that's why this story has crossed generations, not as entertainment, but as a warning. A message passed on quietly, shaped by the fear of each era. Kurupi can be seen as a supernatural being that lives in the forest, but he can also be read as the embodiment of abuse, sexual violence, and the disappearance of women in places where no one asked questions. When we turn horror into myth, it becomes easier to tell, easier to teach, easier to endure, and at the same time, harder to confront. In this context, the forest stops being just a setting and becomes a symbol of isolation, silence, and lack of protection. What's most disturbing is realizing that even today, similar stories still happen just without the name Kurupi. Fear changes shape, but it never disappears. And maybe the true role of this legend is to force us to look at what we rather ignore. Now I want to know what you think. Is Kurupi just a creature from Guarani folklore, created to scare and control behavior? Or is he a dark symbol of something far more real and far closer than we like to admit? If you enjoy stories that explore the darker side of legends, myths, and the mysteries that surround humanity, leave a like, subscribe to Urban Secrets, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos. Here, not every story exists to scare you. Some exist to reveal truths that should never be forgotten.